Hello, everybody. My name is Tammy Horner, and I'm a Colorado real estate agent, realtor, and healthy home advocate. I have a mold story, and I'm a toxic mold survivor. I've been inspired to create a space where my community of fellow survivors and those who are currently navigating the journey can come share their stories without the story and lessons being tied to a product or service that you, the observer, have to invest in order to learn from or contribute to. I'm here to create a platform where people can be heard, where stories that are heartbreaking and overwhelming and honestly often scary, they can be held here, where you, the audience, can hear unedited, unfiltered, real stories of real people from all over the nation who are combating the toxins, both natural and unnatural, in our environment. You'll hear about their journeys and where they are today. So I thank you for joining us, and I ask you to listen deeply with an open heart, understanding that this isn't meant to be prescriptive. It's not about right or wrong, rather, it's an invitation to learn. And when we know better, we can choose to do better. Today, I have mold story number 4 with Jennifer Pillari. Jennifer is a Colorado resident and a prior homeowner who's been on quite a journey with environmental toxins. I'm so grateful that she's here to share her story with us. And I want to encourage those of you who are watching to just buckle in and stay tuned to this all the way through because you are just going to have your eyes wide open. All of a sudden, this is such an eye-opening story. It could be pivotal for your life. So, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time and for being here, and your willingness to share with us. Before we dive into what you've been through, would you share with us a bit about who you are?
Yes. I would say I am still this person, although it doesn't feel like it in the moment because I'm dealing with all of this chaos. But I am a mother of three. I am a writer. I love to travel. I'm an athlete. I've done CrossFit and hot yoga for years. My whole life, I've been active in some way. I am a live music junkie. Um, I am a social extrovert who likes to engage with people. And I am one of those people who's always got a new subject that I'm learning about, although I have been stuck in this subject for 5 years,
Mm,
but I'm ready for a new one.
yes, good on you. Thank you for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about your journey. Where does your journey with environmental toxins begin? What was the shifting point for you?
It began during COVID lockdown. So, March 2020, I had just bought a house, a new to me townhome in July 2019. And I thought it was a perfect place. I had just gotten divorced. So, I just wanted a place of my own and I wanted it to be low maintenance. And it was an end unit. It fronted to open space. It had a really great open concept layout where when I didn't have my kids, I could just be on one floor. And I loved that. So shortly after I moved in, I started having UTIs. And I remember just kind of observing that. And I am an acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist by profession. So I found, some remedies and started taking them. Um, but honestly, I am one of those people, I was never home. I was never home if I didn't have my children because I was always traveling for work, flying a couple times a month, or skiing, whatever, biking, whatever the season was, I was literally never home. I remember I started doing some renovations in that house, and as soon as they got to like the tolerable point, I didn't bother to like finish the backsplash, or I knew I wanted to redo the master bathroom, but I was never home, so what did I really care?
Mm,
Um, then when I did have my kids, we were never really home either. So, COVID lockdown was like a massive shift for me, like it was for many people. And all of a sudden, I went from never being home to being home all the time. And literally within a month, I went from being able to deadlift 300 pounds to not being able to open a door. I
Oh,
had no grip strength. My hands were stuck like this. And I look back and I'm shocked that I did not initially put the link together that it had something to do with my house. But never in your life does that really ever come across your, perspective until you live it. Or until you maybe if you know someone closely who's lived it. But it never occurred to me that it could be from the house. And I just kind of am shocked by that because I'm a person who loves putting together patterns and figuring things out. And I just can't believe I didn't do that. So originally they tried to, it was very hard to get any health care at that time, oddly. But everything was shut down, and I would call my doctor's office and I'd get a recording, and I had such severe brain fog that I was just confused and hung up. Um, and at the same time, I'm trying to homeschool three kids, and my business, because we have an immune support product, had just gone insane. Like March 2020 was one of our biggest sales months in company history. So I'm trying to navigate all these things. I can barely walk. I'm losing my gait. I have no balance. I finally get in with someone, and the first thing they suggest is MS. And I remember looking at them and thinking, I don't think you get MS overnight. I just don't. And saw another doctor. I had lab work done. It all came back normal. All my inflammatory markers were normal, even though, my feet were like 5 times their normal size. And so I was so confused. And finally, someone said to me, did you ever think you might have chronic Lyme disease? And
mm,
I was like, you know what? You might be onto something. And I grew up in Eastern Connecticut, 25 miles north of Lyme, Connecticut. So I knew of Lyme disease. I knew people from home who had chronic Lyme disease. And I remembered that previous summer I had a bullseye rash. That is the part of the story that always blows, that I just can't quite reconcile that. So anyway, I was like, yes, I must have Lyme disease. I pulled up that photo. I read about it. I found a doctor. I went to her. I had my primary care doctor test me. Of course, that test came back negative. Um, I saw a functional medicine doctor. They did all kinds of tests, including a test for mold in my body. And she had asked me, does your house have mold? And like everyone who doesn't know, I was kind of offended by that question. I was like, no, my house doesn't have mold. What are you talking about? My house is perfectly kept, thinking that mold was a condition that you had if you were unsanitary or something. I don't know. So anyway, my lab results come back and my ochratoxin A levels are like 9 times what's considered high. And it again blows my mind because I am just not really like this, that I didn't think much of those test results. She asked me, she's like, well, we talked about where I may have been exposed. And we kind of loosely determined that it was the previous owner of the home had used it as a marijuana grow. I had found marijuana leaves in the trash when I moved in. It was their fault. I needed to get rid of the HVAC. So I spent $20,000 replacing my HVAC and didn't feel better. And I was doing all of these things, hyperbaric oxygen, you name it. I mean, I was spending so much money to feel better. Fast forward to May of 2021, the following year, I continued to have ups and downs. And I was getting very frustrated with my doctor because, you know, she told me, if we do this, 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 and this, you're going to feel better. Well, I was doing all those things plus 100 more things. And some days I felt better, and some days I didn't. And so the pattern seeking person in me started watching for the pattern of when I felt better and when I didn't. And the thing that I figured out was that I felt worse when it rained. And in May 2021, I was lying in bed. I had just gotten diagnosed with my second kidney infection in 6 months. The doctor said it was antibiotic resistant, so they had to put me on two super antibiotics, which I was so frustrated about. I hadn't taken antibiotics in like 12 years, and I probably took 10 doses in a year. And I was listening to it rain, and I was thinking about mold, and I pulled up the test results. And I looked up ochratoxin A, and I saw that it is a nephrotoxin, which is a kidney toxin. And I was like, that's what's going on with me. This has got to be in my house. And then again, the ignorance. I mean, if I could turn back time, I would have done things so differently. So then I immediately made my kids vacate the house. And I was just determined to find the mold, but I had no idea what I was doing. So I was doing things by myself, like ripping up carpet
Mm.
and just kind of like looking around the house, like trying to figure this out and that out, hiring different people who clearly didn't have the expertise I needed, but didn't I didn't have any resources other than a Facebook group. No, and everyone in my life was kind of borderline thinking I was crazy at that point because I had already been on this Lyme disease journey and I had researched so much. I learned everything about Lyme disease. I did podcasts about Lyme disease. I was like a Lyme disease expert. And so for me to change course like this, they were like, maybe there's a different doctor you need to go to, and I could see why they would think that. And then the icing on the cake, I spent $16,000 on mold remediation. They never defined the root cause. All they said was that there was moisture in my crawl space. And at the time, I remember asking them why. I had gotten to that point where I was smart enough to ask why. But the answer they gave me was so insufficient. It was something like the water table was high in that area. So anyway, I dropped $16,000 and all they did was put a vapor barrier up in my crawl space and spray something. I came back to that house and my kids and I had been out of the house for 4 months almost. And immediately the day I moved back in, I was like, nope. Whatever they did not fix this. And at that point, I had already looked back through my inspection. And one thing I saw was that the roof flashing was defective. And so I reached out to my HOA because my HOA insured and maintained the roof. So I had reached out to them and said, can you please confirm that this was taken care of? And we had a back and forth, and they were basically like, we'll send a roofer out. And they said the roofer said everything's fine. And being naive, as I still am, I believed them because I just don't really believe that people are out to get you, even though I
Mhm.
have lots of reason to believe that at this point. But I just believe most people are doing the best they can. And so I just believed them that they sent a roofer out and everything was good. But as I returned to that house after spending all that money, realized that there was still a problem. I started thinking about that roof issue again, and I remember I Googled, how do you find a hidden leak? And one thing that came up was American Leak Detection. That's service that's offered around here. And I called them, and they came over with their infrared thermal imaging cameras, And it was covered by insurance, which was amazing because that was the first. And within 30 minutes, they were like, there's a roof leak. We'll do a splash test to confirm it. They did the splash test. There got water in the attic. So I was like, okay, there's that. So that is how it kind of my story ended with that house. Except then I went on to sue my HOA, and we won't even go there today because that is a different podcast. Because the litigation around mold and the denial and the systemic, you know, attempts to suppress anything about mold and water damage is just, it deserves its own podcast.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I ultimately ended up disclosing everything and selling that house at a massive loss. Um, from there, I rented for a few years. And again, I was so naive and I just really hadn't heard about mold enough to think, I thought my house was an anomaly.
Hmm.
I thought that situation was just a one-off. I got really unlucky. I didn't realize it was every house, and it really is. Every single house I rented after that, and I got to be a professional at breaking leases. I would move in and within days I would know and I would be out of there. I lasted in an apartment complex in Louisville for I think 4, 5, 6 months. Maybe it was 5 months, but it was just way too small for me and three kids. That is probably the best that I felt, but it wasn't perfect. I have rented older homes, brand new construction. Brand new construction with me is the absolute worst. I mean, I tried two brand new homes and that puts me over the edge.
And why? Tell us more about that.
I did testing on one of the homes and its ERMI score was -4. So that's amazing, right?
Mm.
But the Actino score was 20, which is really high.
And
That,
talk about actinos, because the people watching this might not know.
yes, so actinos are a bacteria, and it's common for people who are sensitive to mold to also be very sensitive to actinos. They are often found along with mold in a water damaged building, or in the case of this, there was no mold really. There were just actinos. And one thing I have learned since then is that termites spread actinomyces because the house that I currently own had a termite problem. And so I'm a termite expert now too.
Mm.
I mean, what a joy.
And these are things as residents of Colorado, most of us, and I'm born and raised Coloradan, most of us have never heard of this. We don't have these things in Colorado. Like it's too dry here.
Oh yeah, that's what I believe too. Termites. We don't have termites I grew up in New England. I've heard of termites there, not here. The termite inspector at my current house who did the extermination, or I don't know, he was injecting boric acid into the
Mm.
soil or something like that. I tried not to overthink it because I was just like, I can't even go there. He told me that new construction in Colorado almost universally has termites because of the lumber they use. So I don't know if the termites are the reason why I do so horribly in new construction. I think this is my theory, and I just have not had time to really totally figure it out. I think it's a combo of things. I think things like termites don't help. I think the fact that they leave a lot of the lumber outside and it rains. A lot of the lumber is treated to be mold resistant. So when you treat things to be mold resistant by, Darwin's theory of natural selection, It's survival of the fittest. There are going to be other things that emerge. Do actinomyces thrive in new construction because that's what thrives when you use a lot of mold resistant things? I don't know. I'm
Mm.
not like an expert on it. I'm just learning. But I do know that at that house, that was a townhome, immaculate, brand new. There was a very minor water intrusion issue in the crawl space, and that was due to the downspouts not terminating far away from the foundation. So they
Mm.
were probably terminating 12 inches from the foundation, which I cannot believe that's to code. And I took issue with the city. I mean, I'm sure my city is ready for me to find a new city. I have just, calling them out because I figure someone has to. Why not me?
Yeah.
So I I don't know why why the actinos were so high? I had, you know, I really had no idea. All I knew is I could not be in that house. I developed really weird blood clotting issues in that house. So, anyway, new construction out for me. Every rental I live in has mold or bacteria or something we can't tolerate. So by the end, I knew my rental season was up with the last house that I rented, which was a DIY disaster. The landlord had remodeled the bathrooms and done all this stuff, and he did it himself, and nothing was to code. And I redid one of his bathrooms for him because I knew my kids and I had to last there until I found a home and closed on it, which I had been looking for a home to buy for like a year. And everything that I did really like, I got outbid on, usually by
Mm.
an all cash offer,
Yeah.
and the market was starting to get really weird here at that time, 2023, the interest rates were going up. And I was on kind of a pressure crunch because I had to get out of my lease and get into a new place. And I remember the day I had found a home that I loved, and it was way out of my price range. And I put a bid on it anyway, and I got outbid by an all cash offer. That same day, I walked into another home that was a fix and flip remodel. And I'll say for the record, nope, no fix and flips. That is a giant no. And when we walked into the house, my first impression was it feels cheap. I don't want to I don't want to view any more of it. And we left. Um, well, a couple days later, after I got the news that I was outbid and just looking at what was on the market, because I was really limited to one town because my kids and where I couldn't go live 30 miles away. I would never see my teenage girls. Their whole lives are in Lafayette. So, um, my real estate agent called me and she said, "Would you be willing to consider putting an offer on that house?" And I was like, "Nah, the house I didn't even want to see." Like, no, not really. But she kind of convinced me, and I'm not blaming her because I have free will. But, there isn't anything coming on the market. You need to move on something, I think you should just consider this. There are things you don't like, you can change them, blah, blah, blah. So I talked myself into it and I put in an offer. And I remember I bid kind of low because I said it feels cheap. And the seller got very defensive and was like, I did such a great job on this, which I should have known, red flag right there. Anyway, go through that whole process. The entire home buying process with that home was a giant red flag, and there were so many opportunities for me to exit. It was like the universe was showing me the exit door, and I was not listening.
Hindsight, right?
Yeah,
Because when you're,
I
you can't see it and you can't hear it. Yeah.
and I actually could see and hear it, but I refused to listen
Oh.
because I was just like, I need something. Remember saying to my house self, no house is unfixable. I am so seasoned at this now. I've got all my tools and my resources. I will figure this out. I like solving problems. I can figure this out. And I believed that. And so I went through with it. The day I moved in, I found an active leak. My body found it. There's a way that I feel when there's an active problem, and I knew it from the second we moved in. And I was really annoyed because I had paid extra for thermal imaging, but I didn't use Julie Irk. I didn't use a really skilled home inspector because I had used her a few times on houses that I withdrew my offer after the inspection, and I was just running out of cash. So I was just like, forget it. I'll just go with the basic one because I know I'm going to have a lot to figure out with this house anyway. I bet they covered stuff up.
Mhm.
So find that active leak the first day, and that was just the beginning of me finding. I have a list. It's like 45 items long of all the things that I found. And I'll say, once you start going through your house with a fine-tooth comb, it starts to get pretty scary, things you'll find. And I was just spending money because every time I found something new, I was like, well, this must be the last thing. There cannot possibly be any more. So this is worth it. I'm just going to spend this money and get to this side of this. And then what do you know? Something new. I think there's like an image of some cartoon character where the water leaks and then they plug it up and then the next water leaks and you
And
know
they're trying to hold the whole
yeah,
wall. Yeah.
that is what it felt like. And it felt like first I had to go through and correct all the old issues that weren't corrected during the fix and flip.
Mm.
And red flag, that fix and flip took 10 weeks between when he bought the house and when the house was put on the market. 72 days. Why? I didn't think about that. Why my realtor didn't point that out to me of like, you can't do anything right with a whole house remodel in 72 days. I don't know why. Red flag number one. People can learn from my mistakes. Not a single permit was pulled for the remodel. Of course, how could you in 72 days? So first I was correcting all the old issues that need to be corrected. Then I moved on to correcting the issues that he had caused, with poor workmanship, like replacing the windows, which was a nice touch, but not sealing a single one of them.
Mm.
Putting down LVP flooring, which I personally hate LVP flooring, so I knew that was going to go anyway. Using no moisture barrier, water
Under the
damage.
flame.
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
every single bathroom had water damage under that LVP flooring. He didn't use an underlayment for the hardwood floor. The ducts weren't sealed, or they were sealed with duct tape in 1979. So all that moisture caused the hardwood floor above to bow. Um, the bathroom exhaust fan was vented through the soffit vent, and it was just sealed in there. So there was you had air trying to come out, air trying to come in. That area, when we removed it, was full of black mold. Like, that's probably the most mold I've seen in one area ever. He vented all the kitchen plumbing into the wall instead of putting it out through the attic. It just stopped in the wall, and there's a capped vent in the wall. Um, I could go on and on. Anyway, then part three, I thought, was correcting the issues that contractors who I hired made, because
Oh,
then
no.
you hire people to correct the issues and then they create more issues. It's just a mind-blowing hamster wheel. And even after doing all that, I was still like, I don't feel right in this house. My kids don't feel right. We've all been sick. I almost died twice in that house. Like, and I'm not just saying I almost died. No, I actually almost died. Um, I had a life-threatening low level of potassium. I had at one ER visit, I had the highest C-reactive protein my doctor had ever seen in 45 years of practice. That's an inflammatory marker. Both events could be linked to exposure to something in the HVAC. And I knew there was something weird in the HVAC. I always was like, whenever anyone turns on the heat or AC, someone gets sick. Something weird happens in the house. So then started this odor, and this odor migrated through the house. First, it started downstairs, and I didn't know who do you call when you have just a weird odor, you
Right.
know?
It's
I
just a
called.
smell. Yeah.
And I call everyone. One time I had a plumber, an HVAC guy, and an exterminator in the house. I joked with them that I was locking the doors and no one was allowed to leave until they found the source of the odor because it was making me insane. So I'm getting charged by all these different people to correct problems that don't fix anything because they're not the real problem, and left still with this disgusting odor. Finally, tore down the bathroom, which was one of the areas where that disgusting odor was. And when he tore it down, he did a bunch of air sealing, which I have very mixed opinions on at this point, but he used a bunch of spray foam. And the idea was, I think, to keep the air out of that bathroom. Well, that redirected that odor to the area directly above, which was the kitchen and the kitchen island. And it took a couple weeks to really get going, but the odor was just horrific. And the odor would leave a yellow staining. And this yellow staining I had seen in my house from literally the day I moved in, a yellow or pink staining. I would paint something white and I would look at it after and say, oh, I must have bought like the antique white. I didn't realize it had like a yellowish color to it. Um, Everything. Any caulk always had like a yellow stain. It was just very odd, and I just could not figure out what it was. So this odor creeps into the island. I am certain that it must be a family of dead rodents. So I have my handyman take the kick plate off the kitchen island and to and I was like, okay, let's see the dead rodents and throw them out. Or I don't want to see them, but throw them out. All he finds under there is a white powder, a whitish yellow powder. And he looks at me and we look at each other like, what on earth? What is this? And we just shrug and vacuums it up. And I was like, I just have no idea. I guess I'm gonna have to tear the whole island down. Then a
Wow.
couple days later, I was cleaning that area and I was using a hydrogen peroxide based cleaner. And every time I would clean, there would be this flash of blue, of electric blue. And I was like, okay, now I've finally lost it. Like what I'm seeing things now. Um, and so I Googled what causes an electric blue flash, and one thing that came up was a luminol powder, a white powder that's used in crime scenes to detect blood. And I was like, that's what was under the kitchen island, that white powder. And I was like, who is doing crime scene investigation in this house? And my neighbor had told me like a year prior that the last occupant killed himself in the house. And I really did not think much of that other than that's tragic or that's sad. But I wasn't, this psychological stigma of that didn't bother me. I didn't, their houses, old houses, things happen. It never occurred to me that nobody cleaned up the mess from the suicide. It was like a flashback to the whole my initial mold experience where I was just so ignorant that I thought, mold would be right in plain sight for everyone to see. It would never be hidden behind a wall. I didn't think it would be legally possible for them to not clean up a mess from a suicide. And again, I was very naive. I got my kids out of the house. We vacated in May 2025, and I pulled the police report. And before I got it, my friends and I were kind of speculating, like, what happened? And I was like, well, whatever happened, he walked around the house after and like just got blood everywhere because this issue might be centered right in this area, but it is all over the house. Well, then I got the police report and figured out that he had killed himself right next to the HVAC return vent that was actively drawing air, and his body decayed there for about 2 weeks before they found him. And then, the police come in, do their investigation, and the coroner comes and takes the body away. And then that's it. The house was vacant. The house sat vacant for 4 months before it
They
was
just
sold.
leave it. Everything is just left.
It's just left. There is no other agency that comes in to do anything. And the indoor temperature was 63. That's noted in the police report. And of course, the police don't note in the report he died next to the HVAC return vent, right?
Right, of course. Yeah.
Because they're not, and I don't blame them for that, really. Everyone has their job. But of course, I knew that right away. And the outdoor temperature was -5. So, that HVAC was working hard, really hard to keep up to just be at 63.
Yeah.
And then the house was sold. They did not disclose the biohazard contamination. They never had biohazard remediation done, but they sure did have a pre-listing inspection done where you can see that fresh concrete was poured because he decayed on top of concrete, which is porous. Fresh concrete had been poured in the area where he died. There was visibly new carpet or very white. Maybe if it wasn't new, it had been cleaned because it was very white. And someone cleaned up something. I don't know who it was. Nobody will tell me. Nobody has taken any accountability for anything, which is just such a frustrating part of this world and kind of leads me into what I want to do, what how I want to take all this nightmare and turn it into something good because it's the lack of accountability and lack of compassion that really bugs me. Um, you know, my life in this house has been destroyed. I have never been sicker. My children have never been sicker. And I will say, I worked so hard on that house because I really did not believe it was unfixable. But a person dying in your HVAC, essentially, then having that HVAC circulate for 4 months, then having the house remodeled so you can imagine all the air that's full of decomposition byproducts is still in the house, and they tear up the floors and they tear down the walls, and they basically floored this man into the floors. He is painted in the walls. He is baked into the construction of that house. One of the most contaminated areas of the house or things in the house were my oven racks. I have done so much research about the bacteria involved in decomposition, and it loves metal, or some of them. And endotoxins love metal. I would cry every time I tried to cook anything. Starting like I remember the Thanksgiving after we moved in, because we moved in at the end of September. That was the most miserable Thanksgiving. And after that thing, I was like, we're never doing a Thanksgiving home. And of course, you want to blame it on other things. I'm like, oh, it's because we didn't go see family. Or it's like, no, we were all miserable and crying because that kitchen was so toxic. And even the food that I made had the stuff like baked into it within everything in that house. And I am like a huge chef too, so it's been so strange for me to have no desire to cook. I mean, my daughter missed 3 months of school. I I've like turned into a different person living in that house, and now I am left with this mess. And it is an issue where, since everyone is responsible in some ways, no one is responsible.
Mm.
Everyone is just passing the buck. One of the attorneys for one of the real estate agents tried to blame me, actually. He said it was my fault for not having a good enough inspector. And I pointed out to him that the inspector who I used, coincidentally, was the same exact inspector that his client had used for the pre-listing inspection. The same exact person who did the two inspections on one house, 3 months apart, never asked any questions. Hey, why are these two things so different? Were the issues from the first inspection corrected? Maybe he's seen like 1,000 houses in those 3 months and just didn't realize he was in the same exact house. I don't know. But one thing I do know is this is not my fault, you know,
Right. Absolutely not your fault.
but I am the one paying for it. And But I'm not going to tolerate that. I mean, and this again is where my new business idea I have gotten very good at figuring out who I need to complain to and how I need to complain and what subject I need to put into my email to flag it to get to the right person. I am a professional complainer now, which is not the path I saw my life taking. But you know what? It is a very unjust world for a lot of people.
Mm.
And for me, as a single mom of three who doesn't have, I don't have family who lives here. I don't have a spouse it's me. I've got to always be my own advocate and my own pit bull. And I don't like being that way. It's not native to my personality, but I am a skilled writer, and if I want to say something in a certain way, that's very easy for me to do. And so I have gotten better at getting results for this round. This is definitely a challenging situation to navigate, but I am not giving up until something changes. And I think that a lot of things that need to be changed for this to never happen again to anyone are regulatory
Mhm.
changes.
Mhm.
This has really unearthed a lot of systemic issues.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I'm getting media attention. I think the story will be published this week.
Good.
But yeah, it's been a long, painful road, and I am exhausted.
I hear you and I feel that. And I
Yeah.
completely understand it. This road is just absolutely so difficult to navigate. And you've had layers and layers. A lot of everybody's story is hard, and there's not usually an easy answer for anyone that I've ever spoken to about mold or identifying a healthy home to go into a healthier space where they can step in and make it their home right away. Usually it's layers of actions that they have to take, and that you've been handed this like pe- pardon my approach to this, but one piece of crap after another, just layers and layers and layers is so unfair. But
It
I'm
is.
grateful
And
for your story, and it feels like you are being pivoted toward where your work and your gifts are going to change the paths for people who are navigating this. Can you, there's two questions that I have that will sum this up. One is if there were multiple points where you said in reflection,
mhm.
or in ignorance, what
Yeah.
would you do differently? If you went all the way back to the beginning, I know that there's probably 50 between here and there, but what are like two or three things that you feel would it be the most impactful for someone else to take away?
I think that trust your intuition, first of all. I
Mm.
think this is a story about me not trusting my intuition in many places, because you'll start to gaslight yourself because you get so much feedback of like you're crazy or you're wrong or that you're making a big deal out of nothing. No, you're not. No, you're not. Um, and then the second is when looking for a home, and this is probably the biggest thing that I've learned. I think that the most important thing to look for in a home is the health of the prior occupants. You know, my house, obviously, any fix and flip is going to have a horror story behind it. You know, a home that's bought in a distressed state, unless that person can show you that they pulled all the permits. That seller's property disclosure should have been the biggest red flag on earth. It said nothing.
Yes.
A house that's been around for 45 years and the last person in it went into foreclosure. You're telling me there was nothing wrong? So he was going into foreclosure, but he was still maintaining it perfectly? No, he killed himself.
Yeah.
Um, I look back in the townhome where I originally got sick. The person who lived there died. The last rental I was in before I bought this house, the person there died. Um, I wouldn't buy a house where someone had gotten a divorce, where someone who had gotten very, very ill. I would buy a house where someone got a promotion and now they can afford a new house. Someone who is moving back to be with family, something like that.
Yeah.
I
Ask
think
your
that,
questions. Yeah.
and I know that's going to limit the number of houses even
Sure.
more, but I'm saying instead of spending thousands of dollars on inspections and this and that, and not that the health of the people 100% guarantees it'll be healthy for you. Everyone's genetics are different, but it is a really good sign, of a healthy family live there. And I know how creepy it is to investigate the people, but if you really like a house, you can do a property record search, you can do a Google search, you can figure out who lived there, and then you can find out a little bit about
Yeah.
as creepy as that sounds, if your realtor is not able to get that information.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
But
boundaries that we have to stay with,
yeah,
but
yeah,
we can always ask. And who
yeah,
asks? Nobody asks these questions. You have to start there and just see, who are they? Why are they moving? This is a beautiful home. Why would they leave?
yes. And
Right?
this is a beautiful home means nothing.
Right.
I
Exactly.
have lived in so many beautiful homes.
Yeah.
They were full of mold behind
Yeah.
them, our dead bodies in the HVAC. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just,
You've just been through the ringer.
yeah.
The second thing that I want to ask and just create the opportunity for you to share, you are turning this around and you're going to make a difference in people's lives. You've touched base on it a little bit. What is this going to look like for you?
You know, the most difficult part emotionally for me was how disempowering this whole situation is. Every single part of it, you're just getting shut down,
Mm,
told you're wrong, you can't figure out what to do. I want to empower people because I think that is the only thing that keeps me going, other than my children, is that, okay, I do have a little bit of agency here. I can act on my own behalf to try to get things done. And I have really learned a lot of ways to do that. And so I would like to become a resource for people, and not, and more than a resource, because when you're living in a toxic environment, your executive function and your brain does not work properly. And that was something that I had not really had an issue with. It was one of those symptoms that I didn't really get until I got it. And then it was like if I accomplished one thing that day, it was a miracle. So I think that people could, instead of having to find a lawyer and go through that years of litigation, because I've gone through that, that was 3 years of my life and so much work. Litigation is so much work. Hiring a lawyer does not solve your problems, that's for sure.
right.
Not that I know of. So I would basically act as a liaison for people who cannot figure out how to get out of this maze to at least hopefully get them some results, but at least get the empowered feeling of I did everything I could, I tried, and get them to somewhere else,
Um,
The results are like seem to be mixed so far for me because there's still a lot of education, but I figure if there are enough people beating down the doors of DORA, the Department of Regulatory Agencies, the Department of Health, the cities, when they go from getting me, the one call 4 times a year, to an army of people calling them, bringing this to their attention, that's when things are going to change. And I really want to help people feel like, okay, I don't have to just be a victim to these circumstances and these things that I can't control. I can, move that energy into something positive.
yeah. Oh, completely. And they don't have to do it by themselves.
Oh, yeah, that's the biggest part.
That
Like
would be huge to
you
have you
need
as a
a tour
resource.
guide.
Yeah. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, Jennifer, how would they do that?
I would say the best way would be to email me or connect on my social media, which is just Facebook and Instagram right now. But I am going to start a TikTok.
Okay.
So I could give you my email address or,
Go ahead and say it. Yeah.
yeah, it's ACUPILLARI @gmail.com. And that's Acupillari since I'm an acupuncturist. Um, and on Instagram, it's just Jennifer Pillari, one word. And I think those are probably the two best ways.
Mm. Your story is going to touch so many lives. Already it has. I've been following you. We've been connected on Facebook for a long time.
Yeah.
Watching these things that have happened has been it's so hard. It's like the community that's around you, so many of us I know have had mold touch our lives in one way or another, and different types of environmental toxins and Lyme disease. We have a lot of people who are dealing with Lyme,
Hmm.
and you're inspiring us, and that you are a warrior. Like you're just stepping up and going, No, we're not
Yeah.
going to just sit back. We're going to fight this fight, and we're gonna make a difference." And I know that things will come together for you. You will pull through this and be victorious in some level
Thank
of
you.
pulling things, whether it's in your career that's in front of you or being able to, recoup some of what you've lost. My heart is with you, and I
Thank
look
you.
forward to seeing you shine and hope that this impacts people the way that I feel like it's going to. And so thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.